I once knew a biology teacher who spent 3 decades in the classroom and kept more than 200 houseplants at home. After her first year of teaching, she never bought another one from a nursery, not a single plant. Students would ask her how, and her answer never changed. I just give them the conditions they already recognize. For years, I assumed that was just a poetic line. It isn't. She was describing a very specific technique, and the entire setup costs about $3. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through 3 things: how to build that setup in roughly 10 minutes, the exact cutting technique that gets herbs producing roots within a week, and a tiered breakdown of which plants from your own yard will actually clone successfully, with realistic success rates for each group. No greenhouse required, no specialized gear, no prior experience. But before any of that, let's address the real question. Why does almost every cutting you've ever placed in water or stuck in soil eventually wilt and fail? The answer involves a propagation principle that most beginner-level gardening content quietly skips over. It's not skipped because it's complex, it's skipped because there's no product attached to it. Stick with me for 2 minutes and I'll explain exactly what's happening at the cellular level. Here's what mainstream propagation tutorials tend to leave on the cutting room floor. Stem cuttings harvested from plants you already own can replace the vast majority of what you'd otherwise spend money on at the garden center. A single bag of perlite plus a $3 plastic container, refreshed maybe once a year, is the entire ongoing cost. Retail beginner guides skip this method because there's nothing in it for anyone to sell you. If you've ever watched a cutting look promising for 2 weeks and then go limp, that wasn't your fault and it wasn't a lack of skill, it was a physics problem. Here's the actual mechanism at work. When you cut a stem, the plant needs to generate new roots from the node, and it does this by mobilizing a hormone called auxin toward the cut site. While that's happening, the cutting is simultaneously losing moisture through the surface of its leaves. In ordinary room air, the rate of water loss outpaces the rate at which roots can form. The cutting essentially runs out of water and energy before it can establish itself. The solution comes down to one variable: keep the humidity around the cutting above 80%. Once you do that, the auxin can concentrate at the node without interruption, transpiration drops to a manageable level, and roots form predictably. For most herbs and soft-stemmed plants, that means visible roots in 7 to 21 days, all from material you already have growing in your yard. A $3 plastic box accomplishes exactly this. Think of it as a miniature greenhouse that fits on your kitchen counter. Now let me show you how to put one together. Your supply list is short: a transparent plastic storage container with a lid, the kind you can find at any dollar store or supermarket, a bag of perlite, and water. That's the whole inventory. For comparison, propagation domes at garden centers start around $40, and proper humidity chambers run $80 and up. Yours runs $3. Step 1 is to fill the container with perlite to a depth of 3 to 4 inches. Add water and mix until the perlite holds its shape lightly when you squeeze a handful, but doesn't drip. If water runs out when you press it, you've gone too wet, so squeeze the excess out and let it sit for a minute. Step 2. Close the lid all the way. Not slightly open, not vented, fully sealed. Step 3. Position the container somewhere with bright but indirect light. Direct sun is a hard no because a sealed clear box in sunlight turns into an oven within 20 minutes. After about 2 hours, look at the underside of the lid. You should see fine condensation forming, tiny droplets along the plastic. That condensation is your visual confirmation that humidity inside has reached roughly 80%. The environment is now ready. If you don't see any moisture beating up after 3 hours, the perlite was probably too dry, so add a small amount of water, reseal, and wait again. Once those droplets appear, you've successfully built a stable microclimate. If straightforward gardening techniques that genuinely work are your thing, hit subscribe so we can keep building this kind of knowledge together. The chamber is ready, but the cutting itself is where most people still lose plants, even when the environment is perfect. Step 1. Select a healthy stem somewhere between 4 and 6 inches in length. Make a clean cut just below a node, which is the slight bump or joint where a leaf attaches to the stem. Don't cut in the middle of an internode. The node is where auxin gathers and where new roots will eventually emerge, so cutting above it removes the part of the plant that does the work. Use a sharp blade or sharp scissors. A dull cut crushes the stem tissue and slows root development considerably. Step 2. Strip off all the leaves except the top 2 or 3. Not every leaf, just the lower ones. The top leaves are what keeps the auxin signal flowing downward, while any leaves left near the bottom will rot in the high humidity environment and create entry points for pathogens. Step 3, which is optional, dip the cut end lightly into rooting hormone powder. It isn't strictly necessary because the humidity does the bulk of the work, but if you have some on hand, it can shave a few days off the timeline. Step 4. Push the cutting 1 to 2 inches deep into the perlite, then close the lid. Now let me flag the 3 mistakes that will sabotage this whole process even when your setup is correct. The first, and by far the most common, is opening the lid every day to peak. Every time you lift it, you release the humidity you spent hours building up. Leave the box completely sealed for at least 7 days. The second mistake, which kills more cuttings than anything else, is using potting soil instead of perlite. Potting soil compacts when it gets wet, holds standing water around the stem, and brings fungal organisms with it. Perlite stays loose and aerated and doesn't carry pathogens. Use perlite only. The third mistake, especially common in summer, is direct sunlight. The sealed container traps heat just as efficiently as it traps humidity, and in direct sun, the interior temperature climbs fast enough to cook your cuttings. Bright indirect light is the requirement. So which plants actually work with this method? Not all of them clone at the same rate, and the difference comes down to stem structure. Quick question before we get into the breakdown: which plant have you completely failed to propagate in the past? Drop it in the comments. I'm curious whether it falls into one of the categories I'm about to describe. The success rates I'm citing come from Royal Horticultural Society propagation research and university extension data on vegetative cuttings. Tier 1 is herbs and soft-stemmed plants: basil, mint, rosemary, lavender, thyme, lemon balm, oregano. Success rates land around 95%, with rooting in 7 to 10 days. If you grow any of these, you essentially have a free plant production line on hand. A single established mother plant can yield dozens of new plants per year just from tip cuttings. Tier 2 is semi-woody plants: hydrangea, rose, taking only the soft new growth, never the older woody canes, geranium, coleus, begonia, and fuchsia. Success rates run around 75%, with rooting in 10 to 15 days. Every rose stem you deadhead is a viable cutting. That's exactly what the biology teacher was doing, taking what the plant was already producing and giving it the right environment. Tier 3 covers woody and slow-rooting species: boxwood, holly, viburnum, butterfly bush. Success rates drop to around 60%, with rooting taking 14 to 21 days. But considering these plants retail for $12 to $18 a piece at nurseries, even one successful cutting more than pays for your $3 setup several times over. A few honest limitations are worth mentioning. Succulents don't propagate well in high humidity because they prefer dry conditions, so this method isn't right for them. Bulbs, corms, and rhizomes reproduce through entirely different mechanisms and won't respond to stem cutting techniques. Plants that only reproduce from seed obviously won't clone from cuttings either. And any cutting taken from a stressed or diseased mother plant will fail regardless of your setup, so always take from a healthy specimen in active growth. None of this is magic, it's just the right environment. You're giving the plant the conditions it already knows how to respond to. Before we wrap up, one detail most guides skip. A single box holds 6 to 8 cuttings at a time. 2 boxes cost $6 total and produce dozens of plants per cycle. At retail prices, that potentially represents hundreds of dollars worth of plants for $6 and one Sunday afternoon of effort. One practical tip: label every cutting the moment you place it in the perlite. The medium looks identical regardless of what's planted in it, and after 10 days, you absolutely will not remember which is which. Picture next spring. every bed in your garden filled with plants you produced yourself. A neighbor asks where you bought them all, and you tell them you didn't. You built a $3 box, took some cuttings from plants you already owned, sealed the lid, and waited 3 weeks. That isn't just gardening. That's a kind of self-sufficiency. Go grow something beautiful. Remember what the biology teacher always said. I just give them the conditions they already know. She wasn't being poetic. She was describing humidity physics. A sealed plastic chamber, roughly 80% humidity, auxin concentrated at the node. Now you know exactly what she meant. I want to hear which plant you're going to clone first. Leave it in the comments and tell me whether it's Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3. I read every comment. And if there's a particular plant that refuses to root for you, even in the right environment, share the name. That might end up being the topic of the next video. You've got your propagation box ready, and your cuttings are forming roots. But getting them to take off with vigorous growth once you transplant them takes the right feeding strategy, and I'll cover exactly that in the next video.